Pastor Paul of St. Andrew Lutheran Church of Canyon Lake, back with another devotion in this series of encounters with the risen Jesus, working our way through the Easter season. It is still Easter. The Easter season's 50 days long. It happens that way just because Pentecost comes on the 50th day. I don't know that it needs to be 50 days long, but it works nice to have an Easter season. Basically, we need to just do this long enough that we get to the point where you might be this week saying, still Easter? I remember Easter. Yeah, that was, boy, we made a big deal out of that. Why am I not thinking of that every day? Why is that no longer so prominent in my thinking? We got to have Easter season that goes on long enough that we get to the point where we're saying, oh yeah, now what? So our story for today is one about the disciples getting to that point where they say, now what? But I guess I will just acknowledge that I've gone far enough into the Easter season that we are actually already set up for Pentecost in here. So you can see that behind me. But the story for today is from John 21, and I call it Breakfast on the Beach. It's one of the stories, some Doubting Thomas, The Road to Emmaus. It's a really well-known story. We all kind of feel like we know what it's about. It gets a name. This one doesn't get a name, so I don't know what other people call it. We'll just call it Breakfast on the Beach. And it's a story about when the disciples get to the point where they're saying, Easter, great, but now what? The setup is they see Jesus as a group, the apostles, on Easter evening, we would say. They see him again a week later, and Thomas is present again on the first day of the week. And then it says, and now this is the third time. So sometime later, maybe another week later or something, but they end up going back to Galilee, which ties this together with Matthew and Mark, where the resurrection is associated primarily with Galilee, where they see Jesus. Luke and John mostly associated with encounters in Jerusalem. But here in John, they go back to Galilee. And the best part is, it's kind of humorous. There are a lot of little humorous details in this story. I can't get to all of them. But Peter says, I'm going fishing. And 6 of the other disciples say, okay, yeah, let's go fishing. And in this, you can read into it however you want, but I hear this return to the familiar, like, okay, life-changing news, events, but now what? Well, fishing's what I know. Galilee's what I know. That's their home. Let's go to Galilee. Let's go fishing. And while they do that, they meet Jesus. I tell you, this is the story for all of us who have kind of moved on and saying, all right, we got to get back to normal somehow. What's really changed? And Jesus continues to encounter them in the midst of that. So again, there's so many fun details in this story. I can't go into all of them, but basically they go out fishing. They fish all night. Often they might fish during the night and do pretty well. They don't catch anything. And someone on the shore calls out to them and says, cast your net on the other side. Very familiar to another story in Luke 5 that may be more familiar to you. Cast your net on the other side. They do, and the nets are filled to the point of almost breaking, but somehow they don't break. And as they're pulling these nets in, one disciple says, it is the Lord. He puts it together. Who is this voice from the beach that at the first point, initially, they don't know who it is. So Peter jumps in and swims ashore. They try to drag the boat in this catch. And then there's Jesus, and never mind that they've just caught a bunch of fish. He already has fish that he's cooking over a charcoal fire. Making bread, has bread and fish, and they're going to eat breakfast on the beach there. And then a line I just love, in some translations at least, it says, no one dared ask him who he was because they knew it was the Lord. Well, why do they need to ask if by this point they know? But it deals with this tension of knowing if it's really Jesus, wondering, I know it's him, but could it be? That wonderful tension. And that's the other place I want to go with this devotion, is this is now the third story where we have had someone who does not recognize Jesus right away. We've had Mary in the garden cemetery, and through her tears, she does not realize she's already talking to Jesus. Then we had the road to Emmaus story, where these two disciples, Clopas and another, are walking out to Emmaus for 7 miles. Most of that time, they're talking with Jesus. They invite him to stay with them, and they still haven't realized who it is. And now this one, where the 7 of the remaining disciples are out fishing and don't recognize Jesus at first. The beloved disciple, the same one who just believes the whole thing when he sees the empty tomb, he's the one who says, "It is the Lord." And Peter evidently believes it. He jumps in, and they all come to believe it, but they don't recognize him at first. And that is so helpful for us as Christians, because this isn't all obvious. Even once you've heard the Easter good news, that doesn't mean you're always going to know that Jesus is present and how to know whether Jesus is present and all the rest. This is still pretty mysterious for us. But they all come to know that Jesus is present and then look back and realize, hey, that stranger who was with us, that was Jesus. Or in this case, we've already been talking to him on the shore. Now we know, or we're coming to believe that Jesus is present. And that is so helpful because I think in the moment, it is often very hard to know God's presence in our life, or the Spirit's activity, or the fellowship of Jesus with us. Thank God for those moments when they come. But so often, it is in retrospect. With the Road to Emmaus devotion, I talked about having a story. It's when we look back over our life's story, we sometimes realize Jesus' presence. This is why that poem, Footprints in the Sand, is a perennial favorite, even if it might be a little overused and so on. There's a deep truth there that resonates with people. That idea of looking back and saying, yes, now I see that he was with me. That happens again here for the disciples. Now the third of these stories where that's happened. And I'll put it this way. To realize Jesus is present with you is always to realize he's been present with me all along, hasn't he? Right? And that is such a wonderful realization of what is this gift to have a risen Savior who really can be with us no matter what, and is committed to do that. So I'll leave you with that as we look at this part of John 21. We've got a few more to go and a little bit more of the Easter season. So I look forward to connecting with you again soon.